Welcome, everyone, to the start of a new show here on the channel. I don't have any real plans for this as far as a series goes. I don't even really know what format I want to use for this either. It's not really a podcast exactly, although I guess you could call it that. I wouldn't, just because I think podcasts are way more structured than whatever this is going to be. I don't have a schedule of any kind planned for this or any of the content I make here and on other platforms, just because I know that I'd never commit to it. I don't even have a name for whatever this is. I'm sure I'll come up with one by the time that this gets uploaded, which, knowing me, is probably going to take a lot longer than it needs to. I kind of just wanted an outlet to occasionally yap about the things that happen in my life or that I see as a person who just exists in the world and on the internet. So, yeah, hopefully this can be a lot of fun and people can have fun listening. So, speaking of things that I've seen on the internet lately, I guess we can just jump into what this video is about. There was a video that Asmongold uploaded to one of his YouTube channels last week that is just such a banger. If you don't know who Asmongold is, maybe you've never seen this guy before, or you only know the name in passing because he's been making content on Twitch and YouTube for years. And he has a pretty substantial following. Like, I saw he was live on one of his Twitch accounts the other day, and he was streaming to like over 25,000 concurrent viewers, which is massive. This guy has a crazy reach. Anyway, if you don't know who he is, good for you. I'm about to ruin that, so sorry in advance. He's one of the founding members of OTK, or One True King, and he's done some other notable things like Starforge Systems, which is like a PC building company that he started with Moist Critical. But if you don't recognize him from any of those things, you may have seen his name pop up in stories from gaming news outlets recently, because he's been receiving a lot of media attention for like the last 4 or 5 months for all the wrong reasons. In October, one of his Twitch accounts received a 2-week ban for violating Twitch's hate speech policy. He's also made some pretty gross comments about Sammy Rivers after she won Streamer of the Year at the 2024 Esports Awards, saying that she only won because she's a woman, that she was a diversity pick. If you don't know, Rivers, who you can find on Twitch at Rivers_GG, is a Mexican streamer who broadcasts primarily to a Spanish-speaking audience. Which is why a lot of American Twitch viewers probably don't know who she is. But the only two things that I really have to say about that is, one, she's not a nobody. She has millions of followers and subscribers on her Twitch and YouTube channels. And two, it was a fan vote. It's not like the Esports Awards randomly picked her name out of a hat. Because Asmongold was complaining about how it should have been Kai Cenat or iShowSpeed or somebody else who should have won instead of her. But it was a community vote to decide the winner. So it's not her fault that the international esports community turned out for her more than Kai Cenat or iShowSpeed's fans turned out for them. And maybe I shouldn't expect someone with such a narrow worldview like Asmongold to understand this, but like, dog, you've been making content on the internet for over a decade. You should know by now that the sphere of content creation is so much bigger than the space that just you occupy. But anyway, back to what I was talking about before. I just kind of wanted to give an example of the kind of person we're going to be talking about here. He uploaded this video to Asmongold TV. It was a reaction video to a Cash Jordan video about how New York City is banning people from the subway. Now, I don't have a whole lot of problems with the Cash Jordan video. It's not perfect, but it doesn't do anything too egregious either. It's fine. It's whatever. What is egregious is the reaction that Asmongold posted commenting on this video. Now, before I start ripping into Asmongold's brain-dead takes on homeless people and the homelessness problem, here's a little bit of background. According to the Department of Housing and Urban Development, there were approximately 770,000 homeless people in the United States in 2024. That's a number that's been increasing in the country for decades, and it certainly wasn't helped by the pandemic. And it's a number that is only going to get worse. We also have sort of a cultural issue here in the United States when it comes to how Americans treat and perceive the homeless and the unhoused. Being unhoused is heavily stigmatized in the United States. Oftentimes, it's coupled with this false perception that a majority of the unhoused population is mentally ill. And while, yes, there is a relation between homelessness and mental illness, the majority of homeless people do not have a severe mental illness such as schizophrenia, just to name one. The NCBI has an article talking about this relationship between homelessness and mental illness that I would recommend to anyone who's looking to learn more about this. I might link it in the description. I haven't really decided yet. It's not a very hard article to find, but as Asmongold demonstrates in his video, not everybody is very good at using a search engine. It's also important to note that Americans are oftentimes afraid of homeless people, and there isn't a rational basis for this. I think it's just another example of how Americans don't really understand mental illness and how being mentally ill doesn't inherently make you more dangerous. Whatever the reason is, this is the culture surrounding homeless people here in America. And Asmongold, who, again, has a pretty large audience, isn't helping by continuing to perpetuate these myths and harmful stereotypes against homeless people throughout the video. One more quick clarification before we start talking about Asmongold. The Cash Jordan video that Asmongold is reacting to, the video is titled "New York City Just Banned Homeless People from the Subway." As far as I could tell, that isn't exactly the case. It seems like the title is a little bit hyperbolic about what's actually going on here. However, thanks to the hot demon summer that the Supreme Court had this past year, the city of New York would have the legal means to do so if they wish. If you want to learn more about that, the case was Grants Pass v. Johnson, which effectively allows cities to criminalize being homeless, as SCOTUS ruled that it is not cruel and unusual punishment to do so. Moving on to the reaction video, it starts out about as annoying as you would expect it to. Asmongold starts off the video by making a joke about fat people as he's looking at anti-homeless architecture that New York City has put up to try to stop homeless people from sleeping on benches. There isn't really anything in the first 5 minutes that's even worth trying to contend with because he's just spreading misinformation about insane homeless populations, which I've already said isn't the case and is just a myth. That is, until he says this.
Our subway is actually a mess of New York City's own making, with crime and lawlessness so out of control down here. There is still a force of National Guard troops.
Yeah, they got a lot of people down there. Like, this is what they need to do. If you know that you can go down there and act the fool, you're going to have way more people doing it. Everybody's going to be doing it because now you know that's where you can go and do that.
I love how Asmongold describes people going down and sleeping in the subway as if it's a trend. But more to the point, I really don't think that the proper solution to a rise in the number of homeless people seeking shelter in the subway is to fill the subway with the National Guard. Now, I know the reason the National Guard is there is because New York Governor Kathy Hochul, I think it may be how you pronounce her name, I'm not sure, was trying to decrease the amount of crime in the subway after a string of crimes took place back in March. But I think at best, this is a Band-Aid solution for a much bigger problem. And at worst, this kind of military presence, in addition to the thousands of cops already stationed throughout the subway system, could cause people to act more erratically as they become more stressed out by the constant surveillance. Although, admittedly, that is just me speculating. I don't have anything to necessarily back that claim up. It is worth noting that recently there have been some pretty high-profile crimes that have taken place in the New York City subway. The most notable being a guy who set a lady who was sleeping on the subway on fire, killing her. In addition, there were nearly a dozen homicides in the subway in 2024, which was double what the NYP recorded the year prior, even though the crime in the city overall and in the subway have both decreased compared to statistics from 2023. Moving along, again, we have a lot of stuff that isn't really worth bringing up. Asmongold makes a joke about shooting people who don't pay the subway fare, which I guess if I'm going to say anything about that, there's a part of the Cash Jordan video that claims that commuters hopping the turnstiles and not paying the fees to ride the subway cost New York City hundreds of millions of dollars every year. But the number he uses seems inflated by nearly $500 million. Jordan claims that the city loses $700 million a year, but the Metropolitan Transportation Authority lists losses at closer to $300 million, which sounds like a lot, but considering the city's annual budget is close to $100 billion, $300 million is a pretty negligible number. Personally, I'd be more worried about the hundreds of millions of dollars that the NYPD has to pay out in wrongful death and misconduct settlements every year. But I guess that's just me. And speaking on people not paying the subway fare, Asmongold does this thing that I think is so funny. And he does it kind of a lot throughout this video, where he acts like he cracks the code to people not paying to use the subway.
If it costs $700 million to have fare losses, wouldn't it just be better to have somebody there and pay them like $100,000 a year to just stop them from doing that? But why did they not figure this out? 700 million is nothing. Yeah, but 10 million to pay the guys to sit there is even less.
One, they already do that. It's not working. Two, as far as the shooting people who don't pay thing goes, they're kind of already doing that. I don't know if you guys remember the story of the police officer, two police officers, I think, opening fire on the guy who pulled a knife after hopping the turnstile, hitting him and 3 bystanders, one of those bystanders being a cop. I don't know. I just think that's kind of funny. What's not funny, though, is what Asmongold says about a minute later about the killing of Jordan Neely. If you don't remember, Jordan Neely was a homeless man living in New York City who had a mental health episode while he was riding the subway. He was yelling about how desperate he was for bare necessities, saying he wasn't afraid to die or go to jail. Some of the passengers reported that he was throwing trash around on the subway and that they felt intimidated by him. At some point during his breakdown, another passenger, Daniel Penny, an ex-Marine, restrained Neely with a chokehold for about 6 to 7 minutes, killing him. Asmongold claims that Jordan Neely had to be stopped because he had a knife, which, no, he didn't. I legitimately have no idea where he got that from, and it's not like he cites any of his sources for any of the things that he says. He then goes on to talk about how the West has become soft on people with mental illness, I guess. I honestly don't know. He says some shit about performative activism and how people are only focusing on solutions that make themselves feel good, but don't actually solve the problem, which is a very interesting take to have, considering that from the very start of the video, he's saying that homeless people should be removed from the public eye because it makes everybody else uncomfortable to see them, that it would cause friction, that letting homeless people exist in the same space as people with stable housing would cause conflict.
But like, if you put these people in a place with the public, you're going to have a lot of friction, and it's going to be bad for everybody. It's bad for the homeless people, and it's bad for the public too.
And the hypocrisy is constant in his video, and he never picks a side either. He just keeps using the same argument to justify both stances, which doesn't work. But something about this video that is very strange is how close Asmongold gets to sometimes giving a rational take about the mental health crisis and homelessness epidemic that our country is facing. Like, immediately after spreading disinformation about Jordan Neely and talking about performative activism, he says this in response to somebody in his chat.
You can't shoot people that are crazy. I pay my taxes every year. Like, my family pays their taxes every year. If we have somebody in the family that's nuts, I would want my tax money to go towards the government taking care of that person. And so, like, you can't just shoot the crazy people because those people's families have paid into this system to take care of them.
But before he can really finish his thought, he starts talking about whether or not taxation is theft and how private ownership isn't real because the government defines ownership. I don't really know. I also don't understand how he can justify Jordan Neely's death by saying, you know, he was acting crazy and he needed to be stopped, but then turn around and say that we can't just kill people who are having mental health issues. Again, like, pick a side. You cannot do both. He also brings up like this low-key socialist answer for bringing food to the homeless. But again, he's saying that while talking about people protesting outside of Trump Tower. And it's like, does Asmongold not understand that protesting is a part of activism? Because this whole time he's been complaining about how activists don't actually do anything to solve problems. But really what he means is that activism that doesn't align with his personal views on systemic issues doesn't count as real activism because he just doesn't agree.
Unhoused? Yeah. So people, the unhoused language, it's like undocumented immigrant. Like, If I go and I steal something from a store, am I an unreceipted customer? No, of course not. It is soft language that's meant to be a euphemism to make people think more positively about the group of people. It's annoying, never play into it. They're homeless and they're illegal immigrants. It's that simple. Any other language is a lie.
So here is where I want to take a step back to talk about the language that is used when talking about these issues. First of all, I don't really know why he's bringing up illegal immigrants in a conversation about homeless people sleeping in the New York City subway. But regardless, I really want to know, I wish he would tell me, why using terminology like unhoused versus homeless or undocumented instead of saying illegal immigrant as a way to make people think more positively about that group of people. What's wrong with that? Why is using this terminology to describe this marginalized group in a more positive way a bad thing? Part of the reason why Americans broadly are not willing to help the homeless population is because of the stigma surrounding their conditions. Using this language is a way to combat that stigma and help ease people's knee-jerk reactions about the issue. It's a culture thing. And a way you can change the culture surrounding an issue is by changing the language you use to describe the issue and the people involved. Beyond that, unhoused and undocumented aren't just woke euphemisms. When you are speaking about cultural or political issues, the language that you use has to be precise. It has to be accurate. Unhoused isn't a term that simply refers to people who are homeless. It also describes people who do not have stable or reliable access to housing or shelter. Just like how undocumented doesn't just describe people who may have entered the country illegally, it can also be used to describe people whose documentation may be inaccurate for any number of reasons. Because what do people think of when you say homeless? Right? They think of a filthy, disease-ridden, lazy bum who's crowding the sidewalk. When you say illegal immigrant, they automatically jump to an image of a violent criminal, drug and human traffickers, people who are actively looking to do them harm. And the same stereotypes go for the homeless population, that they're violent drug users who could snap on you at a moment's notice. I mean, how many times in this video alone has Asmongold made statements that perpetuate that same stereotype? Using terms like homeless or illegal immigrant is a strategy to intentionally dehumanize them, to make people afraid of them. Because if people are afraid of them, they're not going to be willing to help them. And for the people who hate these groups and don't want them to exist, making people afraid of these groups will help them gain support for solutions, and I'm using that term very loosely, that remove them from the equation entirely. Not using language like undocumented and unhoused doesn't make you smarter than anyone else. All it does is make it harder to have a genuine conversation about the problems these groups, these vulnerable people, are facing and how we can help them. And I don't have any delusions about Asmongold having any real empathy for the homeless. I'm sure that he only made this dumbass video to play to his base, who either is just as hateful towards marginalized communities as he is, or just doesn't know any better. It just pisses me off that someone who is so clearly uneducated on this issue and who has obviously never done a minute of research in his entire life about this topic gets to have a say in the cultural perception surrounding it. It's ridiculous. And one of the ways that you can tell that somebody doesn't actually care about an issue is when they reduce it down to numbers.
They put everybody at risk, and they cost the city a lot of money. Let's say there's another Jordan Neely, and he gets choked out or killed. Well, this is going to be the train is delayed, everybody's upset, there's a bunch of police that come down, there's a trial. This is collectively millions of dollars of a problem. You can't let that shit happen.
Personally, I don't believe that we should be reducing the death of a homeless person down to how much money it'll cost the city to clean up and get the system moving like normal again. But it is kind of insane that he said this in the form of, I just want the trains to run on time. I thought that we learned a long time ago that we couldn't do that. But a few minutes later in the video, we see a guy walking around the subway with a Skittles box on his head. And I think it's really important to reinforce that while, yes, this is a strange thing to see, this behavior is abnormal, there is nothing inherently wrong or dangerous about this guy existing in a public space. I understand that seeing this will make people uncomfortable, and that's not unreasonable. What is unreasonable is taking action against this person without due cause. And you might be saying, okay, but there's clearly something wrong with this guy. The city should be able to remove him from the subway before he hurts himself or someone else. And yeah, maybe there is something wrong with this guy. But I'd like to remind everyone again that there is nothing inherently dangerous about what this guy is doing. He's not breaking any laws. He's keeping to himself. And yeah, he may look a little funny, but that isn't a justification for allowing the state to remove him without his consent. And I'd argue that that's the real danger. Giving the state the power, the authority to put people it doesn't like into custody whenever they feel like it. That is a fundamental violation of a person's civil rights. But let's pretend for a second that it isn't a civil rights violation so that we can address another problem. Let's say that this guy and all the rest of the thousands of homeless people in New York City are removed from public spaces and sent somewhere, either to jail or a mental institution or whatever. Because you might notice nobody actually brings up where these people are going to go if they're kicked out of the subway. But when they are eventually released, because you can't hold them involuntarily forever, where are they going to go? If your answer is anything other than back to the streets and the subway, you and I are not living in the same reality. You would have to be brain dead to legitimately believe that arresting them and throwing them in jail is somehow going to solve the homelessness crisis. Because now you're putting even more people in our already overcrowded prison system, which is going to cost the taxpayers more money because apparently that's all these people fucking care about when they talk about the unhoused. And when you release them after they've served their sentence, however long it's going to be, they're just going to go back to being homeless. Because you didn't do anything to solve the problem long term. Not only that, but now you've given them a criminal record. Something that infamously makes it harder to find employment, to find a place to live. And when they inevitably fail to successfully reintegrate into society because all you did was sabotage their chances at leading a semi-normal life because you didn't provide them with any real help, any real solutions, they will be sent to jail again. And the cycle continues. But the part of this video that is just so baffling is that Asmongold talks about a homeless man in Austin who was some sort of like local celebrity, basically, who was killed. And he acknowledges that this community is vulnerable, that the homeless community are victims. And I don't know if he necessarily meant it in this way, but he's right. The unhoused are victims of a country full of people who don't care about them and are looking to do them harm, not the other way around. But the reason that this is so confusing to me is because all of a sudden he's talking about how this community needs to be protected, but he has spent the entire video reaffirming the idea that the homeless are a danger to the public and that they need to be removed. And then it dawns on me that Asmongold is now doing the same sort of performative empathy that he has spent the whole video railing against. And this is about the point where I tapped out. I'll admit it, I didn't finish the video, and I didn't need to. You can only engage in a bad faith argument for so long. There are only so many ways that I can critique how Asmongold doesn't understand the homeless community, how he doesn't understand how activism works, how he doesn't have any real solutions to offer. And really, I don't think that that's what he was trying to do here in the first place. I don't think he made this reaction video in good faith or to spark some sort of deep conversation or bring awareness to the homelessness epidemic here in America. He's only doing this because he knows he's going to get the views. And all he's really doing is exploiting these people's suffering for his own personal gain. Because as far as I know, the money that he's going to make from this video and the live stream that these clips were taken from, that isn't going to go to any sort of outreach program. It's not going to go to a shelter or an activist organization that's going to try their best to help these people. It's going to go straight to his pocket. And honestly, that's a tragedy. because Asmongold is in a position where he could use his resources and his platform to make a real change, not the kind of, systemic change necessary to fix such, a large societal problem as bad as this. There's almost no single person who could do that, but he's not even going to try. And in his own words, that is nothing short of pathetic. Yeah, that's basically all that I really had to say about this video. It sucks. It's bad. Don't watch it. Or at least that's what I would say. But this video has been up for, a week, and it already has garnered like nearly 1 million views. So it's a little late on that front. Asmongold doesn't have any idea what he's talking about. But like I said, I don't really think that he was making this video because he was trying to have a genuine good faith conversation about this failure of our society. He just knows that, it's going to play to the people in his base who are going to be the most loyal and give him more money, basically. That's all that there really is to it. And I hate to end the episode on such a downer note, but really that really is all that I have to say about this. If you are a part of Asmongold's community and you're listening to this or watching this right now and you have made it to this point, legitimately, like, all jokes aside, good for you. It cannot be stressed enough how important it is to be willing to hear out the other side, not just, for a hate watch and to point and laugh and be like, oh my God, look at these dumb libs, how stupid they are. But being able to make an attempt to understand the other side's perspective. You know what I mean? Not to get like any more soapboxy than I have already, but it really is important, and not living in this sort of echo chamber that is provided for content creators like Asmongold. Because that doesn't help anybody other than the person in the echo chamber, and really all that does is it hurts them because it prevents them from having the sort of deep thought necessary to tackle issues like this. But yeah, that's that really is it. So thank you all so much for tuning in. Like I said, I don't have any plans to continue doing this in any sort of like scheduled sort of way. There will be future episodes because I can think of things to talk about and to ramble about for as long as I need to, but thank you so much for tuning into this time. And yeah, whenever the next episode is, whenever that comes out, I hope to see you there. So thank you very much, and hope to see you soon.